You're listening to NIL Now, a podcast dedicated to the name, image, and likeness of today's college and high school athletes.
So we're going to explore the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness.
NIL Now, covering the latest sports business headlines and keeping you informed on the nation's top performers. This is NIL Now, where the stars of tomorrow are getting noticed today.
It's the Wild Wild West, but we're wrangling it in.
Presented by Headline Studio and Reddit. Here are your hosts, Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
Hey, what's up, my friend? We're back with another episode of NIL Now, a production of Headline Studio and Reddit, where we cover the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness, and it only heats up from here. It's been fun. We've been rolling through as we hit episode number 13. Later on, we're going to speak to Virginia Tech women's basketball star and 2022 ACC Player of the Year, Liz Kitley. So stick around for that. We're going to love that conversation. I know my buddy Kevin Jones here will too, because, they dab it up quite a bit over there in Hokie country. Right, KJ?
Right. We dab it up over here in Hokie country.
We're excited to talk to her. We obviously talked about her cooking show, her NIL deal that she had that you helped to orchestrate on one of our episodes. And so I'm excited to kind of circle back with her and see how things went and get some more information about how everything kind of worked out for her and just a unique situation. So we'll revisit that coming up later in the show. So stick around. But for now,
NIL headlines.
Real quick off the top, because I feel like we have been talking about a lot of these different NIL deals, and some are positive, some are negative. It's interesting because we have a lot of folks that are on the wagon, a lot of coaches, athletic directors that have spoken out about it in a positive way. Hey, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We got to run with it. We got to use it to our advantage. And then, of course, you have several that have also stayed in that camp of this is terrible for sports. This is terrible for college athletics. This is not working. And one of those folks is former Cornell athletic director Andy Noel. He sounded off about NIL in an interview for ESPN Ithaca's Between the Lines show. Noel recently retired from his role at Cornell after over 40 years in working at the Ivy League school. And he called NIL a, quote, absolute disaster. And so he said programs can now, within the rules, buy a team. I hope the pendulum swings back, but I think it will. It's an absolute disaster. I think this is the worst change I've seen in my life in athletics. So after 40 years, worst change he's seen. Kevin, I know you've got some things to say about this.
I think he's crazy. I think it's wild. We keep talking about wild. I think his comments are wild. I don't want to call him irresponsible, but I just think that for him to come out and say that, also in the article, that there's no value in NIL, where he could see where he can rattle off a bunch of cases where there's no value happening. And I think it's crazy to say that. I mean, there's value that the kids and their family can be compensated. There's value in the deals that's happening between brands and marketing deals and things like that. There's also value in getting high-profile athletes to your university for recruiting purposes. So maybe he's just not in that type of high-profile sports. It's a different, Ivy League is a little bit different. So I don't know. I just feel like those comments are a little bit harsh and not necessarily accurate.
Well, and I think this goes back to where the pendulum is. Is it fair for all schools? And I know earlier in the year, I had Air Force Academy as one of my teams in a bowl game, and there was some talk and discussion about how they don't fairly get to be compensated and have some of those same opportunities in the recruiting world. But, it's already hard to recruit to Air Force Academy, right? You're already recruiting a certain type of athlete, a certain type of, man or woman. Their aspirations are different, obviously, as to serving our country when their time in school is done. So it is a different landscape, and maybe you're right. A lot of that might fall there in the world of Ivy League athletics as well, because you are recruiting a different type of base of, student athletes based on the academic standards. So interesting kind of how that works. Moving on to our next headline. We're circling back on another topic once again that I think is interesting. And this has just been an evolving door and something we talked about extensively in a previous episode. Olivia Dunne, LSU gymnast, Olivia Dunne did an interview with Today, and the interview is very interesting. If you haven't seen it, you can search it there. She was on the Today Show just talking about this was coming out of that New York Times story that we talked about before, where she was kind of given a little bit of the other side of the feeling that, how is she out here doing this? This sets women's athletics back. This sets females and women in general back based on, I guess, the notoriety she's getting for whatever reasons she's getting it. And you and I, Kevin, had talked about that and kind of being on both sides of the fence, right? That there's, I think pros and cons to everything. I have my feelings about it and stated those feelings with Olivia really being an athlete that's not doing anything that other 18, 19, 20-year-olds aren't doing on social media. She's just now being compensated for it. But then there comes a price. And I think the price that this, I guess, interview on today sort of outlines is the security that's now needed. She goes to a gymnastics meet. People are yelling and screaming, "We want Livy, we want Livy." It's twofold. You get these fans that show up to a sport in gymnastics. Gymnastics wasn't a sport like you, Kevin, where you fill the stands with, 60, 70, 80,000 fans. Gymnastics in recent years at certain schools has started to fill coliseums, which has been great for the sport. And as a former gymnast, I love to see it. But you can say on the positive side, her notoriety is bringing more attention to the sport of gymnastics, which is great. But then also it's interesting because now they're having to hire security, bring in, extra security to kind of protect these girls. And I think that the coach there at LSU made a valid point. He said, with social media just in general, you suddenly feel you almost have a connection to somebody. And Kevin, I think that's something that is just the nature of where we're at in this world in general. People just assume because you're on social media and you talk to people, you communicate, you provide comments and commentary, that they know you on a personal level.
But look, Olivia's making millions of dollars. I was like, when I listened to that interview, I was like, wow, she's making 7 figures. And I think that's awesome for her and her family. This also can be looked at as a case study / model for other athletes to do something similar. But with more money, more problems, right? You have
more money,
more problems. So you have the limelight, which high profile athlete would have, and then the money that comes with that. So that's going to bring some negative attention and positive attention. You're going to get the best of both worlds, whether that be negative or positive, good or bad. So you just got to be, I would say, self-aware. Know what you're putting out there, know what the type of attention that's going to bring, but also, with being in the social media, boosting that attention up, you just have to be private about some things. You don't always need to post your location and what's going to be happening with you at all times. So as long as she stays within the guise of, LSU athletics and make sure that, the security and all those things knows what's happening, I think this kind of is going to be kind of part of the territory now that she's like blowing up like this. So I don't think the coach was complaining much. He's still for it. Her coach is supporting her. The teammates are probably trying to figure out how they could, also garner some, finances and things like that. So I think they just need to roll with the punches and try to keep safety at the forefront of it as well.
I think we just saw the dad come out in KJ. The advice that comes out that he would tell his young children as they're venturing off into the world. Because you're right. I think that there are protocols, things. And, I don't think it would be any different if you had maybe a, 16-year-old reality star that enrolled in a school or even a child of a major Hollywood superstar, right? Actor. Even athletes, right? I think a lot of times you find that these students that have a tie-in to a celebrity status, maybe when they come on campus, already brings in that attention. And so I think that just being smart about it, and maybe that's one thing schools really need to impress upon these kids, these students, if they aren't already doing so, is that, okay, I know a lot of schools, I know Alabama specifically, Nick Saban talked about the financial classes they're now instating with these athletes to ensure that they know, okay, yeah, you're making this money, but oh, by the way, now you have to pay taxes. And there's all these things that come with now making money. Maybe there's some other things they can implement too about the safety and just, following certain protocols and things that need to be done just to ensure that, something catastrophic doesn't happen. And in this case with Olivia Dunne, just being mindful of that because she has reached a level of celebrity status. And I think it now has to be treated as such.
Exactly. I think you hit all the points right on the head. She definitely needs security. Once so many eyes are on you and people are engaging with you at that level, I think that security and all that stuff is definitely needed. And then you hit the financial planning stuff is definitely something that we're trying to impart with our kids at Virginia Tech as well. I mean, you got to pay those taxes, you got to be properly insured, all those different things that the money and the industry is bringing to the forefront from an educational standpoint.
Good stuff, Kevin. Dad hat goes on today. I love it. All right. So speaking of dads and sons, I love this final topic here. John Daly. I don't know if you guys know much about John Daly. Usually always has the wackiest, wildest. You can spot him from a million miles away on the golf course. PGA golfer, John Daly. That's who we're talking about here. His son, John Jr., signed a deal with the male grooming company, Manscaped. Daly Jr. plays currently on the golf team at Arkansas. And so this one's a good one. I love this one. It made me laugh. I watched this commercial a couple times and I giggled quite a few times. So the commercial, he appeared in this Manscaped commercial titled Grip It and Trim It for the brand's beard hedger. You're laughing about this. It's funny. And I want Dean, you need to unmute yourself, Dean, because we were talking about this before we came on the show. You know, when you think about Manscaped, your mind goes somewhere else, I guess, right? And I guess this commercial does just that because Mr. John Daly Sr., old John Daly, thought the same thing, apparently.
Yeah, when I initially saw this before watching the commercial, that was my first thought. And then when I'm thinking about adding it to the show, maybe that isn't appropriate for the NIL Now show, but and I think it plays into the comedy of those two. And Lauren, like you said, this wacky golf personality. The first thing he does is go to unfasten his belt. And there's John Jr., John the Second. No, it's for your beard. It's just so good. And the junior has a deal with Hooters, so that it's right there on the NIL portfolio that John Daly has built for his son, kind of.
Yeah, I was dying laughing at this. First thing that came to my mind is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess. This is a hilarious commercial, especially obviously for the male audience. I had people cracking up. But I think it's the perfect personality for Manscaped, the brand as well. So they bring the son into the madness with the dad and his reputation. So I had to go back and watch some of the old videos of dad on the golf course, throwing his golf clubs into the water and all the different antics he used to do. So, yeah, I think this falls right in line with the Manscaped branding and the audience that it's going after. So I thought it was a good commercial. If you haven't seen it, you got to go check it out.
Well done, obviously well produced. And the last thing I'll say about the NIL deal, I think the Hooters thing is funny because if you know anything about the Masters, I've now been a couple times, not trying to make what do you call that?
You're flexing on us right now that you've been to the Masters. Yes,
that's the word I'm looking for. I'm not trying to flex on y'all and say, I'm a big deal or anything. That was all very lucky to get to go. But it was funny because you drive by the Hooters outside in Augusta, and that's where obviously John Daly camps out and sets up, and that's just kind of his deal. He's known to always show up there and be there during Masters weekend and attracts people in droves so that they can witness the antics of John Daly. So it fits it well. All in good company. I think it's great. It's funny. And one of the funnier ones. So you guys got to go check that out on YouTube, or Golf Digest has a story as well. Just Google search John Daly and commercial and you'll find it. So good stuff.
NIL headlines.
All right, it's that time of the day as we check in with our good buddy Bobak from the college football team over at Reddit. And we're going to circle back from a hot topic from a week ago. Jaden Rashada, the hot topic. The quarterback signed his letter of intent with Florida, was expected to get a payout of $13 million through NIL deals. That all fell through. And then it was like, now what? How are we going to get out of this thing? Well, the good news is for Jaden, who is obviously a bit jaded, I would say, from how things fell apart at Florida. He was kind of stuck in this situation going to a school that didn't pay up and didn't keep their commitment on their end. He was able to get released from that national letter of intent, and he is now reportedly set to visit colleges again after he was let out of that on that list, reportedly Arizona State, which I guess had been on his list before, that according to multiple reports. TCU, Washington, Colorado, and Cal also rumored to be on that list of schools that he's interested in visiting. And with that being said, Bobak, anxious to hear your thoughts and what the Reddit folks and fam are talking about in regards to Mr. Jaden Rashada.
Well, since we're talking about where he might end up, one of the comments that struck me was by an Ohio State fan, Tommy Brady 20, who, respectfully is a third party. No matter what school he picks now, he's going to be in the portal within 24 months. Not a doubt in my mind, was his thought. And some people therefore started comparing him to the legendary journey of Tathan Martell, who was at Texas A&M, to Ohio State, then to Miami, then to UNLV, where he became a wide receiver and never really saw the field. So some are comparing it to some of the more journeyman quarterbacks of yesteryear. But, we'll see. I mean, frankly, the other thing is just watching Florida's kind of unfortunate train wreck that's been going on with trying to find a quarterback. Because in the last 2 months, they unoffered a quarterback for rapping some lyrics of racially insensitive nature. And then they had another quarterback arrested for possession of child pornography. Now they just released a quarterback from a letter of intent over, an NIL deal. And it's just been bad luck, as USF fan Green Neal pointed it out. And as some of the Florida fans think they got rid of one of the quarterbacks because they thought they were making room for, Rashada. And now, of course, a lot of folks are saying that really this is the opportunity for, Graham Mertz to take over since he's transferring there himself from Wisconsin. So maybe, somebody said, as a Florida fan, Sean 1512 said, this is Graham Tebow 2.0 Mertz. He doesn't care for some 4-star quarterback. This is all him.
Yeah, I think this is wild and crazy, just like we talked about. I guess you got to let him out the deal if you're on the side of breaking the terms. Like, how can you keep him to a deal if you're not going to pay him the $13 million that you signed him up for? So I think this is crazy. We'll see where he lands. He's a California kid. I'm also starting to think this brings up another interesting point that I've been thinking about is maybe these kids that are from certain states, their NIL, I think, will be better if they stay in the state that they're from, actually. As you travel across states, you don't necessarily have that fan base from, California, or if you're from Pennsylvania. Like, for me, back when I was playing, it's a little bit different. NIL wasn't available, and I'm from Pennsylvania and went to Virginia, obviously. So, Virginia Tech. Let me not just leave the Tech off Virginia, by the way, as I say that. I was talking about the state, not the school. But there's, it just brings up an interesting point that some of these kids should stay in their home state if they want to maximize the NIL dollars. But for him going to Florida or trying to go to Miami first and all this stuff is going on, I think it's wild and crazy. So glad he's out of that deal, and hopefully he'll land in a spot that works for him and get an opportunity to play and not bounce around from school to school. Hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point because in many ways, I hear a lot of coaches kind of on my travels all over the country covering different teams with ESPN. And, there is a lot of discussion and talk about retaining kids in the state. And that's something that they've had to push to do. And that's something that they've lost really, kind of the upper hand in when they're not able to keep kids in the state. And a lot of coaches have re-emphasized wanting to get back to that recruiting within their state. And you bring up a valid point that I think that with the NIL deals and where we're heading, that this could certainly provide, an upside for that being the case, because they're well known amongst a lot of the communities, the brands, and they already have established themselves in that regard, especially if they're these top star athletes that are already getting that notoriety in high school. So, Kevin, I think you bring up a good point. And Bobak, one thing I wanted to circle back to real quick about just, propping these guys up and these expectations. And you kind of, I guess, sort of the joke that came through, whether he's joking or not, but from our Reddit fam, about the expectations. And I've seen that so many times. We've all seen it. And, I think back to when I was covering Auburn pretty much every week, and Jeremy Johnson was one of the quarterbacks that came in, and the expectations for him, they're parading him around at SEC Media Days, talking about him being one of the top quarterbacks in the country. He's going to be the Heisman hopeful. I mean, and this was all coming from the coaching staff, the pundits, the media pundits, the outside world. And all of a sudden, you've got this flood of people basically believing in this kid, had these expectations, and the poor guy couldn't sustain it. It was a complete train wreck. And, I felt for the kid because, what a wonderful young man, someone that I thought was, had so much potential, but just a great guy to talk to. And, someone that, was great with the media and, just had a lot of heart. And then all these expectations really just derailed him. And so you sometimes wonder with these NIL expectations, are we going to see some of the same things where a lot of these kids with the expectations end up not having as much success because of those expectations being held on them at such an early point in their careers.
It certainly puts an interesting kind of awkward, I wouldn't say mark, that's a strong word, but now this young guy, everyone knows him as a kid who was part of that deal that fell apart at Florida. And, some of the fans on Reddit have pointed out, they feel some sympathy for him because it's not like you can't blame him for taking that kind of a crazy offer. I mean, again, the details of all of this will hopefully be hashed out, as some people, and I'm one of them, hope it gets hashed out in litigation because that's always fun and glorious and full of skeletons being brought out into the open. But, supposedly he was being offered some substantial amount. I've heard the number $6 million thrown out at Miami, and then Florida ups it by $1 million per year, and he takes that deal. It's hard to blame a kid for taking these kinds of things. Although, and again, as one Florida fan said it, this all reminds us of the Pony Express days. Hey, we bribed this kid and he isn't honoring the bribe. But now it's a little more. It's now more on the up and up. It's a little bit more in the open. Certainly, though, I think a lot of folks just wonder if this is going to be the moment where, at what point will some of these boosters decide that maybe they're throwing too much money at some of these kids who, obviously in the case of a high school prospect, are unproven. I know there was an article that was also on Reddit from Jeremy Crabtree writing about, whether or not it was overvalued or not. And my favorite part of that entire article was just an ACC assistant said the deal was the dumbest expletive I've ever heard. When looking at this entire saga. So I think that's the gist of all of it, and whether or not how it has an impact and whether we'll see more of these is going to be an interesting question. And I think a lot of fans are going to be curious.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So that kind of brings us to our next topic as we kind of wrap up this segment, talking about just the overall NIL, I guess, theme that has taken on Reddit, in sort of what you've been seeing. And there's been so many fun comments just from fans kind of getting a feel for the likes and dislikes of NIL. And I think that we're getting obviously a ton of opinions about it. That's what Reddit's good for, right? That's why you guys are here. So everybody can hear the chatter and the discussions going on amongst the fan bases, which makes Reddit obviously very interesting and unique. So if you had to maybe pull some of your favorite or most interesting comments, things that you've seen from the overarching kind of take on NIL, Bobak, what would that be?
There was a Florida fan, Deet, that said, something I like, Bryce Young in Fansville. Something I dislike, a rogue collective leader offering ridiculous sums of money to high school kids, which an Alabama fan couldn't help but reply, and then backing out of said deal. So that's been one of them. But it was interesting, too. My favorite kind of back and forth that was sort of happening as people were sort of discussing what they thought of their true feelings of NIL right now was Georgia fan Nero kind of summarized one side of it. I thought there would be limited to NIL things like video games, billboards where school use a player for a photo kind of thing, jersey sales and TV ads. And this is just unrestricted annual free agency. Honestly, the portal or NIL needs to be reined in a bit, and probably both. But even another Georgia fan who did a good job of voicing the other side of it, Uga's a good boy. No offense, but I don't understand how so many of you guys were that naive. What possible mechanism would they have to limit the types of ads and value of contracts? And it's completely wishful thinking in his mind. And I personally lean that way because, I remember how this all kind of grew on a grassroots level in places like Reddit and other social media. Oh, the video game. Oh, the video game. Oh, they can't do it because of this, which in my mind, as an attorney, sounded a little nonsensical because there's always a way. They just couldn't make the money work, and they blamed, we can't have the exact players. Well, nonsense. Hoy. Now everyone's hyped out about a game that I'm convinced is going to be a completely disappointing EA product coming out, I guess, this summer. There's no way. I mean, they're doing such a miserable job of hyping it up. What we're going to see this summer is whether or not the game is even worth all of this and all of the constant hand-wringing that we saw year after year after year from fans who thought this was just a way to get the video game that they really wanted.
Yeah, we wish this was all about video games. I think the video games is a big part of it that spawned a lot of it. But we can't forget that part is like to save college basketball, so that players could not be one and done every year. And now it's like football is taking over. Is what I think is my theory.
I think that's a little more accurate. I think, frankly, it was wise moves by some of the plaintiffs' attorneys to try and publicize it that way to get more people to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
It's a video game. And suddenly a bunch of people start caring about it when really, it wasn't about that. It was getting compensation and just compensation to some of these young people.
Exactly.
You're listening to NIL Now.
All right, and now we get to our final segment of the show, and I've been looking forward to this one because we've been talking about getting this guest on our show the past couple of weeks after we did a segment on her a couple weeks ago with an NIL deal she signed through our friend, Mr. Kevin Jones in Triumph NIL. So excited for this one. He helped facilitate this deal. So we're going to bring it full circle and ask her how things went. So we welcome into the show Liz Kitley. She is a center for Virginia Tech, ACC Player of the Year in 2022. Liz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's just give everybody some context. Back on January 17th, you were able to sign a deal with Gourmet Pantry and Cooking School, and you were able to host a cooking class. And so that is just part of one of the many NIL deals and things you've been working on and some projects and stuff. And certainly cool that KJ was able to be a part of that through Triumph NIL. And yeah, so Kevin, just go ahead and take it away. I'll let you start this one off with the Q&A.
Well, there's a whole Triumph team, so I can't take all the credit. Like, I'm involved, but, there's a lot of people working behind the scenes that made that deal happen. And obviously Liz was the star of the show. So, yeah, we just want to talk to you about how it went. What did you do? What type of food you cooked? Just kind of give us a rundown. Let the fans and people listening hear what your deal was about.
Yeah. It took a little bit of planning. Me and Roya, the owner of Gourmet Pantry, had a few meetings. We got pretty close over the planning period. So we talked a lot about just what kind of food I like to cook and what was my favorite thing to eat and stuff like that. And so then we kind of decided on a Tex-Mex themed night, and we did an enchilada casserole. We had guac made. We did pico. We did a black bean and corn salsa. We did Mexican rice and creme brulee all on the same night. So
I'm getting hungry again.
It was a lot, and I took some leftovers home with me, so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, your parents showed up to the event, so that was cool to see them there. We had the Triumph team, some cameras. How many fans were there? It was a kind of an intimate setting. It wasn't a huge audience, but it was cool for fans to be up close and personal.
It sold out, which is nice.
Heck yeah.
Gourmet Pantry is they sell kitchen utensils but it's really a high-end gourmet kitchen store where you can buy pots and pans, but they also sell wine and cheese. It's just one of those high-end spots that Liz took over for the night.
Very classy place. Very classy.
Obviously, this opportunity, what kind of stuck out to you about this particular NIL deal and this opportunity to cook? Are you someone that loves to cook and someone that's always been interested in cooking? Is that something that's been of interest to you for a long time?
Yeah, I definitely do really like to cook. It's something that's, different from basketball and school, what I always am normally doing. So that's what I really liked about this opportunity, because it was an opportunity to show a different side of myself and to explore something else besides, what I'm always doing. So it was just really fun too. Coming straight from practice and then putting on an apron and cooking for 16 people is a different experience. I didn't expect to do that this year, but I'm glad that it happened.
So as now a new Gourmet Pantry chef, Could you give yourself a rating? You know, you got to try the food, you took it home. Obviously you had leftovers, you were able to take some home. So it was good enough to take home. So that's the good news. Could you give yourself a rating? How do you feel like you performed there at the cooking stove and in the pantry area?
I mean, I can't take even half the credit because Roya is just like a master at what she does, and she's like the culinary expert. So I would say I'm like her little sidekick now. So I would give the duo, sous chef. I'd give the duo a 10 out of 10, but I can't, rate myself.
It was good. I showed up. I showed up a little bit later in the evening and had some of that creme brulee, and it was top notch. What did you learn anything that you already like didn't know in the through the process?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously her holding the cooking classes there, it's an opportunity for her to show off like some of the cool things that they sell there. So they had like a few really cool gadgets that I didn't know existed, and I definitely am going to add them to my need to buy list because I didn't know they existed before, but they make a lot of things a lot easier.
Yeah, the cooking class there is dangerous because anytime we go, I think they offer it. I'm not sure if it's weekly. It may be weekly. They offer the cooking classes. Ori is always changing it up. But every time I go, if Robin goes, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a tab of things that we buy for our house. Yeah, exactly.
But then the key is that's what you have to say. Okay, that goes on the list. But then you have to set expectations for how often you're going to use that new gadget, right? Okay, if we're going to buy this thing, you best be cooking up some good food for me, right? I love that. And Liz, I guess, another question I have is, through this process, getting this opportunity, how have you been able to really balance, you talk about playing basketball, right? And that's sort of your mainstay, but being able to work with these other opportunities, do different things, step outside of that basketball bubble, so to speak. How have you been able to balance that with the NIL, the business side of things, as well as competing with the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard during the season, especially because we're always like traveling and playing 2 games a week and stuff like that. So it's difficult. But I think taking advantage of our like off weeks or our off days during the week and stepping away from basketball for a little bit is really cool because then it just makes me appreciate it even more when I get back, and I think just makes me more well-rounded and happier in general. And I think being happier will lead me to perform better. So it's just a valuable thing to have balance.
That's good. Yeah, no, we at the end of that when we talked about possibly doing more. Are you open to doing more cooking classes? I think it'll be something that people would like in Blacksburg.
Yeah, I think not too long I'll run out of personal recipes, but hopefully I can help with that.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to just pull the curtain back and be able to see you guys in a different light and to recognize that you do have different interests, right? Because obviously we're so used to seeing you as athletes and, just competing, right? Always competitive. And I'm sure you're probably competitive there in the kitchen as well. You never want to come up with a burnt creme brulee or mess things up in the kitchen by any means, but it is really cool. I'm curious to know for you, being part of this NIL landscape, seeing the change, because obviously you came into Virginia Tech when NIL wasn't a thing, and maybe it had been briefly talked about a little bit earlier in your career, but then implemented and stated during your career, and now you're kind of at the peak and the height of it all. What are your thoughts sort of on NIL and how it has transpired and evolved from when it first started and maybe even before it started to where it is now?
Yeah, I think when it first started, everyone was still really unsure of the potential that could come from it. I think people just had to feel it out for a while, and now that it's been, what has it been, like a year and a half now, I think, with it being an option for people, I think it's just really cool, and it just allows athletes to benefit off of what they've created and done for themselves. And, that varies a lot across different sports and different athletes, but even like small scale things, if it can benefit someone, then I'm just really glad that it's now an option for people to pursue.
That's spot on. I'm hearing that from a lot of athletes that do get some deals, whether it's large or small. They just want to be able to participate So it's not always, it doesn't always have to be some mega deal or some large amount of money, but being able to participate in their name, image, and likeness and bring something home for savings or for groceries or whatever it may be, housing, the different things that are out there, as long as, everybody's able to participate, I think people are generally happy with that. So our job is to come up with creative solutions between our, the business community and then our athletes, and to try to make things happen. And I think this is a good example of that.
Yeah, NIL, you guys have done a great job with Triumph there, Kevin. And, it's just fun to see these opportunities. And I guess kind of wrapping things up, my last question for you, Liz, getting to participate in these type of opportunities again, when you first entered into college, it was really not even a thought. And now you have these opportunities. How do you think things like this will benefit you in the long run? When you hang up the jersey, when the basketball is over, when you enter into real life, whatever that career may be, how do you think that participating in business deals like this, getting to experience the business world, might help you in the long run?
Yeah. I think if it weren't for NIL, I probably never would have seen a contract in my 4 years in college. And now, I've seen a few, and that's, obviously a whole big thing on its own, in the business world and stuff like that. And me being a science major and stuff, I just have no knowledge of business whatsoever outside of NIL stuff, I guess, because I'm not learning about that in school. So it's completely new to me, but it's interesting also. So it's cool to see that, and who knows, where my career will take me and what, business skills I'll need then. So to acquire any or learn anything about it now is really cool.
Just to piggyback something else that has not necessarily been said on this channel, is that Liz is one of the best players in the world, right? In college, especially in college sports. And so at Virginia Tech and then Triumph, we're going to do all that we can to keep her here, So our goal is to come up with these creative things, and then also things that she likes, that she's talked about or expressed to us, and try to make deals happen for her so that we can keep her at Virginia Tech as long as possible. So hopefully we don't lose her to the WNBA next year, but it's quite possible, right? So she's breaking records. She just broke a record the other day at Virginia Tech. So our goal is to keep these things going. I think Coach Brooks will like that as well.
Yeah, it's a win-win, right, Liz? How many more years of eligibility do you have?
I'm a senior, but I have my COVID year. So
okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, which muddies the waters, because whenever I'm trying to go over rosters and things like that, I'm always like, it says you're a senior, but obviously you've got another year, this and that. So, but we'll let that rest there. You can make those decisions when that time comes.
I had to pitch it.
Right, no pressure. KJ had to add that in there.
Yeah.
Again, so great. You've made me hungry. I'm ready to go down to the kitchen and cook dinner right now. I'm like, what can I do tonight? It sounds like a burrito night. Something Mexican would sound really good right now. So I'm into it. I love it. All right, Liz, thank you so much. Again, a big thank you for joining us on the show. Liz Kitley, Virginia Tech women's basketball star. You're awesome. Of course, you can follow her on Instagram at Elizabeth Kitley. That's Elizabeth Kitley, Kitley. And stay tuned. Maybe you'll find some of these cooking videos on her Instagram account. I'm anxious to check those out when those become available. So it'd be fun to check those out. So thank you again for joining us, and good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, Liz.
You can follow us now on NIL Now Show on Instagram and Twitter. Also on the Reddit NIL channel. Tell a friend. Let us know what you think. Give us some comments. Share your thoughts. And then, of course, you can find the episode wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you again to Bobak Kyeri and the Reddit College Football team for their help. You can follow them at Reddit College Football, also on the Reddit channel there on Twitter. I am Lauren Sisler. My co-host is Kevin Jones. A big thanks to our audio engineer, Colin Schmeling, our associate producer, Dean, and our executive producers, Richard Diamond, Selena Roberts, and Scott Broder. Until next time, peace.
Thanks for listening to NIL Now, presented by Headline Studio and Reddit.